evening and welcome, dear friends, to this sixth session of the 2023 Turner Winter Series, now in its 18th year and now coming to you from the Kappa Theater in the Robert H. Jackson Center here in Jamestown. I'm Maureen Raveno. Whether you are here in person, watching through live streaming, or if you are joining us later via YouTube, it is my great pleasure to begin our time together with a brief introduction of our very distinguished guest, Sally Baer, which will then initiate the conversation between Sally and our perennial host and the founder of this series, Jamestown's and the Jackson Center's own Greg Peterson. So let me first say a few words to get to know and appreciate Sally Baer. Sally Naetzker Baer has traveled to war-ravaged Ukraine on 6 different trips, and she has coordinated 25 other courier trips since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of last year. Originally from Asheville, New York, she is still a local resident who today will be sharing with us about the hope and light of over 700 volunteers and donors coming together to form a community of hope and light, and in the process raising over $650,000 in support and aid during this difficult time for Ukraine and for the world. Sally will share with us that her inspiration is her faith and the knowledge that the light always overcomes the darkness. Sally Baer, spelled B-A-E-R, is the proprietor of her family business, delightfully named 6 Bears Toy and Gift Shop, located at 50 Chautauqua Avenue in Lakewood. In her conversation with Greg, Sally will share with us how we can contribute to this effort and join with her and so many hundreds of caring people who recognize that we have a responsibility to care for those in need around the world. Sally's organization goes by the appropriately named Baer Essentials NFP, a hardworking and dedicated not-for-profit. As you can see, there is much to discuss, so now let's please welcome our perennial host, Greg Peterson, in a fascinating and inspiring conversation with our distinguished guest, Sally Baer.
Thank you, Maureen. And before we get started with Sally Naetzker Baer, I'm going to draw attention to the TV there, Sally, and we're going to watch a brief video clip which ties in your dad to Robert H. Jackson.
Office, or one of his first, was down in the Falconer area. And because my grandfather's plant was down there, he went down and talked to him and thought quite highly of his new young lawyer and started giving him some business.
I'll be there.
And one of the things that they did together was that take the train from Jamestown to Wellsville to see about collecting some money from a furniture factory down there that owed my grandfather what was then a considerable sum. So my grandfather and my grandmother and Justice Jackson and her, or at that time Lawyer Jackson and his wife, took the train all the way from Jamestown to Wellsville, which was quite a ride because this is way back in the early part of the last century. And they conducted their business successfully and came back home that same evening on the train.
I'll be there.
And my mother, who was a little girl at the time, remembered her mother and father coming into the house after their trip. And my grandmother making a comment that Mr. Jackson seemed like a nice young man, but he should be a little more attentive to his wife. Oh, good. Well, that's that one anyway.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah. So they just, evidently they got well acquainted. My grandfather was a real straight shooting old businessman, and they got along quite famously because they were both of the same piece of cloth.
Yeah.
And over the years, they just kept in touch that way. So I keep running across these little notes that Jackson wrote to my grandfather, one when he was Solicitor General, and another one, I think, after he was on the Supreme Court. So, interesting stuff.
Wow.
What's it like to hear your dad?
Yeah, no, it's really something. And it's something to feel the generations, of impact here in this community. And he was a remarkable man. It's just really something.
there is a Naetzker Park when you go
Yeah.
along 394. Why that? Tell me about your dad.
Yeah, so the Naetzker Park actually, it's kind of a strange little piece of land with nothing there but a sign that says Naetzker Park. And my dad's parents, so my grandparents, purchased that land in hopes to keep it forever natural, foreseeing what was going to come on Fairmount. And this was a long time ago, so Fairmount wasn't what it is today, and that's why that piece of land is green and says Naetzker Park, is just to kind of preserve that. And my dad was a big history person. I grew up going to every single Civil War site, every book that was ever written about the Civil War. My dad took us there, and he was into his own family history. And our ancestors settled up on English Hill, and my father had a bunch of letters that were written during the Civil War between the people on English Hill and the men that had gone off to war, and the relationships that were developing, and then subsequently marriages that happened. And my father and I think it was in 1999, he, one finger at a time, typed those letters onto paper.
Yeah.
And then I took them and had them copied and made a real simple binding of them to share with family members so that people would have that record of what had happened. And he had guns from the Revolutionary War on through. I mean, he was quite a man.
Mother have the same interests?
My mother, she was very good about the whole going to the different historical sites and whatnot, but I would say that they were in many ways opposites, but they definitely created a family that was, I'm very proud of my family. So, and they set the bar quite high, in my opinion. Yeah.
So, your family consists of how many siblings?
So my mom and dad, my 3 older sisters, all a year apart, and I have a brother who is next in line, and then it would be me. We're all a year apart. My brother is severely mentally handicapped, and that changed the course of my father and my mother's life, as you can imagine, and all of our lives. It really set the tone for the rest of my life. The whole David and Goliath thing was pretty much ingrained from the get-go. In the 1960s, having a severely handicapped person in your home and integrating them into the community wasn't really a popular thing to do. And my parents were ground setters for that. They really helped establish that precedent that it was okay to bring, a severely handicapped person out into the world and integrate them. So.
Does the Resource Center play a part of your
Yes.
existence?
Mhm. And then I have a younger brother, 7 years younger. That's
Okay.
Yeah. So, yes, my brother went there for most of his career. He retired, oh my goodness, I want to say it's 10 years ago, but as you get older, doesn't time get a little weird? For me, it's gotten a little weird, but I think it's more than 10 years ago. My mother could no longer care for him,
Yeah.
and my sisters share that responsibility now.
Do you sense that part of your growing up, and you have a brother that needs assistance, help, sort of underscored your involvement in sort of public assistance?
Yeah, absolutely. It has defined me in many ways. And like to watch your parents give their life in service in many ways, that's what it was, right? They put aside what they would want to do. And now my sisters are doing it. They're in their 60s and they're doing it. And so even though my service tends to be more public, I'm well aware that that service is going on around me all the time. And so, absolutely.
At some point, you get married. Tom is in the audience. If you want to say something nice about him during the course, and pay a little more attention than probably Robert Jackson did to his wife,
Yes,
according to your grandfather.
Yes.
And you have 3 children, and you involve them in a process. How did that happen? I mean, you're in Asheville. all of a sudden you decided to do something else.
Right, so we actually have 4 children.
Okay, 3, excuse me.
Yep, nope, 3 are here. So Tom and I, I was born and raised in Asheville, and Tom was born and raised in Bustye. So that was like a foreign country.
Sure.
In my earlier years. Anyway, I went to JCC, like many people my age did, and then went on to Stony Brook down in Long Island and stayed in that area for 20 years, developing a career and doing a variety of things. At one point during those 20 years, I went to Ukraine and spent 4 months in Peace Corps. And then Tom and I met, we got married. His first wife died in a commercial plane crash in 1994. And I think we had a sense of responsibility to that maybe we didn't, I think we did articulate it very early on in the marriage, and that's where the service focus came in. And we were very privileged to be able to adopt from Kazakhstan and also from Ethiopia. And Ethiopia took us to Ethiopia for the next 9-10 years. We spent the majority of our time there, coming back to the US, having a little pop-up gift shop to balance things out a little bit in various places in Panama and out in Conewango Valley. And then we settled, well, we were getting ready actually to go back overseas. We wanted to move to Kazakhstan. We had done 3-month trips, taught English, we're developing relationships, and COVID happened. And it sent us back to Western New York where our parents are and they're aging. And so we've been here 2 years. And when I'm saying all these things about my current family situation, Tom is this like kind of quiet foundation that makes all things possible. And he is often the person behind the scenes, but without him, nothing happens, literally nothing happens. So it's been quite the partnership so far.
Why Ethiopia?
Because our one daughter's from Ethiopia. And so I went there by myself in 2008. I wanted the time with her. She was 4 years old, and I wanted the time together alone with her as her mother, her new mother. I met her birth mother there, and within a week, I knew that we had been searching for a place to go overseas to serve. And I came home and I said, Tom, I think this might be it. And he went with our oldest daughter, Emily, and she spent a month, and he was there for maybe a week. And within 3 months, we had moved.
So while there, it's a new culture.
Yeah.
And how did you establish yourself? You can't just parachute in.
Kind of, that's what we do. Is we kind of do that. We actually went with an organization and said we'll help and volunteer. And Tom installed 3 commercial playgrounds that they had purchased and had there, but nobody to install. One was at a government orphanage. One was south at a orphan, private orphan care place that was just developed. And we had finished that work, and we were like, what do we do now? And our guard, it's quite common in a country like that to have a security guard on premise all the time. He said he had bought a little piece of land not far outside of the capital city in a rural area, and so we headed out there, and we loved it. It was a place called Dolly. At the time, it had 30 mud homes in it, and the children and our family became one big giant family. So we rented a little mud hut, and on Sundays I'd go out and cook a meal in the traditional Ethiopian way. We'd make noodles and just simple things, and the Muslims that were not allowed to eat with the Ethiopians, their parents broke that rule because it was us, and we all gathered together, and then we started a library and started doing education and teaching English, and just kind of snowballed. So we created a nonprofit back in 2009. I think it was completed in 2010, and that's the Baer Essentials that you see today.
What's your background?
Mine?
Yeah.
Very eclectic. I went to, like I said, JCC. I'm a sociologist by academics. I was in a PhD program for sociology. I have a master's. I did not finish the PhD. And so people and groups and culture has been a big, and my father, and my brother, because he was a different culture. People couldn't relate to us the way they would relate to a family that didn't have that in it. So I always related to different cultures in a way that I almost didn't relate to American culture, because I just didn't understand the simplicity maybe of other people's lives. But so anyway, I worked in retail with Timberland and Eastern Mountain Sports. I don't think there's many of them left. And then I worked I went to graduate school, and then I worked for AC Nielsen, the largest market research firm in the world, and on Kraft General Foods, which is the largest consumer products good company. And I worked on Post cereal. One of my accounts was Post cereal and Lender's Bagels. I don't even know if that exists anymore, but anyway, so very eclectic background, but always interested in overseas. My first trip out was I was a nanny to 2 boys that were from England. They grew up out in the countryside. I actually went to Prickwillow, where that Wilson family comes from in England, and saw the cathedral where they were married back in 1500s or whatever it was, yeah.
Wow.
And the historian and I got to talk. And I took them to England by myself. I was maybe 20 years old, and took them to France. And while we were there, it's very common for children to drink wine with their meals, and we were out eating, and I think the boy hadn't had enough to eat or something, and he didn't have a pleasant experience on the streets of Paris that afternoon. But
he probably remembers it.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't kept in touch with them. So that whole international thing was there pretty early on.
So you're a little bit of a Mary Poppins. You're in a part of that world, and this no doubt is going to get a high AC Nielsen rating before this gets this particular event, because I'm feeling it right now. And then Tom, what's his background?
The opposite. In many ways, we're the opposite. He grew up. He was born in Michigan. He grew up in Bustye. He's lived within 20 miles of his parents' house until the day that we met. And then he had an adventurous spirit, had taken a bike ride. He rode his bike to Michigan, I think, Green Bay. He owned a bike shop, so that entrepreneurial thing was there. And we had, it's just been a fantastic story, for sure.
Yeah.
And so then we met, and he was ready, I think, to kind of do a different life in some ways, just because, it was a tough thing what he had gone through. He'd raised his daughter at that point for 7 years on his own, and we got together, and we haven't stopped since. And we kind of look at each other sometimes, and we're like, this has been a ride. I mean, it's really been a journey, and it's been, there isn't anybody else that we could do it with, really.
So this is a remarkable life arc you got going on here, from Ethiopia, and then you leave Ethiopia and go to a couple other countries as well.
Yeah. So we went our time in Ethiopia was winding down. The programs were still going, but they were going on their own. So that's what you kind of want. You don't want to be like a nursemaid or rescuer, in our opinion. And so we were glad that these programs and things were established, and people there were taking on roles and whatnot. So we looked at each other, and we're kind of like, now what do we do? And it was almost like we took a map of the world, and it wasn't quite like this, but it felt a little bit like we just kind of threw a dart at it. But we looked at each other and said, if you can only go to one other country in your life before you die, and we ask that question even today. We often ask that same question. Anyway, at that point, if we only had one country in the world that both of us would want to go to, it was Nepal. And basically, it was a way to try to decompress from these 8 or 9 years of really intense work that we had done in Ethiopia. And not being associated with an organization, we are working with nationals all the time. Our children are with nationals all the time. We could get our own water, we could get our own food. We lived without electricity or blackouts on a sporadic basis, all those kind of things. So going to Nepal was not going to be an issue that way. And we went and we were there for 5 months, because that's as long as the visa would go. And I ended up teaching English to a Korean couple and Nepali family that owned the building that we were living in. So we continued this kind of service thing, but also just really focused on getting our family kind of together and sort of what next steps were and what we would end up doing. And then we went to Kazakhstan and traveled, into Europe, but the European piece was just, I think, like 4 days. For me, I'm more comfortable in sort of these less developed places. So when Ukraine came up, I was like, okay, this is like, going to Ohio. This was not going to be a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Then COVID hits,
Yeah.
and you find yourself back in Lakewood area.
Yeah, which we're really grateful. I always, I'm just really grateful. It's a beautiful, beautiful county. And we have traveled a lot and looked at different places to live. And this was it. My husband often says that we were looking for here, basically. And it was really great that our parents, in their, age kind of made us want to come back during COVID. It was a very isolating experience for older people. And we're so grateful because it's a beautiful place and we have this really fun, joyful little toy shop that has just been awesome to be in the community in that way.
February 2022 occurs. You read, as the world reads, with shock and awe, the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. What's your reaction when you read that?
We were sitting, I remember the exact moment that this all started. We were in our, whatever, family room and watching TV like the rest of the world probably was. And I was just sitting there watching it like in complete disbelief. Like I couldn't believe that in this century, we grew up with kind of like, okay, the world's calmed down. Everybody's going to just settle into their roles and yes, develop in many ways, economically, spiritually, physically, whatever. But to have somebody just walk in and take over a country or try to do that, it just felt really shocking. And I, sat there and my heart was like going and I kind of thought I could do something. I'm old, which this has been a real huge asset for me, is my age in this situation. Nobody would pay attention to me. Nobody would feel threatened by me. I'm a woman. All these things really helped play into this moment. And I looked at Tom and said, I think I should go. And he said, I think you should too. And little did we know what was going to unfold.
Just thinking about that conversation, I think I should go and do what?
Well, I in the moment, I didn't know, but I think my history of having that feeling and trusting it and doing it had shown me that we were never, it might be hard, but that it was never going to be the wrong thing to do. So I was very confident that I was supposed to go and that something would happen. Like in my mind, shortly thereafter, I had reached out to a Ukrainian friend in the United States. He's here on educational visa, so he's from Irpin, happened to be from Irpin. And actually, as I tell you this, I start to have the same sense that I've had a lot during the last year of sort of being in a dream, almost like it's not real, like this couldn't be real, like this isn't real. But this guy was from Irpin, on a church there, Irpin Bible Church. And I said, Vlad, are you okay? He said, yes. And I said, what can I do? And I actually have a text that I saved. I saved them all. And I said, look, I'm an old woman. I can do anything you need me to do. Nobody's going to pay attention to me. That's what I said to him on like March 4th of last year. And he had a friend in California that also is a Ukrainian young guy. And he had raised $40,000 within the first 2 weeks. And I thought to myself, well, if this guy can do something, I certainly can do something like this, right? So I was in relationship with him. I knew he had 9,000 pounds of military vests and infrared sights. And I mean, I learned more about war. I was never into wars except for the Civil War. Like, I ignored them basically the rest of my life. But I really learned a lot. I was in Asheville General in the stock room the first time somebody from Europe asked me if I could get the military plates to go inside of vests, that they could make them. They knew people in Ukraine that could make them, but they needed the plates. Well, I have to find out, well, what do plates look like? How much, what are they? Where do you get them? And so I Facebooked, put a thing out and said, anybody out there know anything about military plates? And all the military people that I didn't know were military people responded. So anyway, I just knew that I could do something. And so, in fact, I ended up purchasing quite a bit of stuff that they wanted for Irpin. Most people in the beginning of the war that were citizens and volunteers didn't have military gear. So the only way for them to be protected was by individuals like us. And to this day, so many months later, I just today sent money to a friend of mine to help buy a car for an individual that's now in, Bakhmut. And so the individual role in this war has been mind-blowing to me, that an individual, that people like that can make a difference, grassroots. And of course, big organizations have their place, but so do people. Individuals saying yes have a huge, huge impact on what's happening.
So you kind of accumulate a wish list from folks, whether they're drones or whether they're tourniquets, and then gather, but you've been there. I mean, not only are you doing it here at stateside, but you take it
Yes.
upon yourself to deliver it. How does that work? How does the logistics work?
Well, the word logistics is a paramount word, because from the beginning, like I am, just this person along with other people that just showed up in Poland, you're just dropped into this pool of chaos. There's 40,000 people leaving Ukraine every day.
Visualize it. You show up in Poland with what, a car full of stuff?
So these two guys wanted things for their friends, literally their friends in Irpin that were defending Irpin. It's right outside of Kyiv. And without this gear, so that bridge that you see with all the people trying to leave Irpin, that's their family and friends. The first horrible photo that you see of people laying on the ground, one of those boys was their friend.
Okay.
So this is a really personal story and very highly motivated. So I said, okay, and I made a Facebook group and I got couriers lined up to start taking the stuff that they had and stuff that I was starting to develop, through relationships with them. And that courier group resulted in 25 or 26 couriers where they paid their own flight. I told them on Amazon what to get, what they needed, what the levels were, tried to. Sometimes, stuffed animals would squeak in and I'd be like, sorry, but this is a war. We don't want stuffed animals right now. We want, the top stuff. But Wilson, my son, he was 22 at the time, I asked him to come because we'd been around the world. We knew each other, like how to deal, how to help. And he was invaluable. Together we made one functioning person. I rented a car the first day I was on the ground. I was with these two characters, one from Irpin, pastor, and the other one from South Carolina, pastor, North Carolina. He used to go to Irpin every year, so he was highly connected to Irpin as well. So we meet. They had just met a very large humanitarian aid organization, two guys at the airport. You're in the middle of a war. If you're a functioning human being, what can you do to help get this going? What can I do to help get this going? They talked. This big organization wanted to buy 3 vans to start shuffling aid towards Ukraine and get people out of Ukraine. I was supposed to be one of the drivers for that. So the second day that we were on the ground, on a handshake between this organization and these two pastors, because nobody had any money in the country, and the organization couldn't get money in the country because they're a big organization. So these two guys call up their church and end up getting it into Warsaw, but it took months. So on a handshake, we went and bought these 3 vans. I started driving one of those vans the very next day to the border and picking people up and then bringing them to train stations, to various like homes. We set up 2 guest homes. One is still functioning, has 12 original women and children in it right now. And then started driving into Ukraine, into Lviv. There was a, what's it called, a religious school, theology school, that was connected with Irpin theology in Lviv. So we would drive there, drop off all the aid, and then pick up people at the train station and bring them back into Poland, all the while coordinating these courier people that I had lined up. And actually Bill Ward, local singer, his wife, I'm like, can you please help coordinate some of this chaos, because it was just all happening so fast. And then my second cousin texted me. I would get text at 3 a.m. and said, I know a guy that owns a logistics company over in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I was like, okay, I don't, like, I'm an individual, I'm working, like, I called myself a bottom feeder. I could get all this stuff done, and anybody in an organization couldn't, because they had to get permission from somebody. So I was like, I don't know about this. But the very next day, this pastor from Irpin came in and said, Vlad from California hasn't been able to get his military vest and infrared sights and stuff into Poland. And I was like, well, maybe it's something. So I called the guy, and he said, oh, my international person is there. And so I call or text this guy, and I say, where are you? He said, I'm in Poland. I said, where? We were literally 2 miles away from each other.
Wow.
So we met. There was back and forth between humanitarian aid and military aid. Again, a common theme from the beginning of the war. Mm-hmm. And organizations, individuals, humanitarian aid, military aid, all these common themes. And anyway, long story short, there was a woman, Gretchen, it's Logistics Plus out of Erie, Pennsylvania.
Jim Berlin.
Yep. And they're only meant to do humanitarian aid. And Gretchen, who's one of their international, she was in the same town I was too. It was very surreal. We met for breakfast, and I said, can you do this? And she said, no, because it's not humanitarian aid. And I looked at her and I said, look, these are citizens that are defending their land and their people in Irpin. And if we don't protect them, as with this aid, then we're not going to need the military aid, or the humanitarian aid, I'm sorry. And that's how I felt. And anyway, they sent that 10,000 pounds of stuff for Irpin. At that point, Irpin had already been reclaimed, and it went on to Mariupol, but nonetheless, it got there and still served its purpose. So
how do you get across the border? I mean, do you have visas? How does the chain of custody, not only of the product, but also you? I mean,
Yeah.
You just don't show up at Ukraine.
Yeah, you kind of do. And that's the beauty of being an individual, is that nobody pays attention to me. So Ukraine is well aware of what I'm doing at this point. The border is well aware of what I'm doing. You have to go through not only customs and declare what you have, so they always know that I've got typically $15,000 worth of drones and tourniquets and whatever in the back of my car. And Poland knows. So that piece is fairly smooth because they want this to go in
Sure.
there. And again, I think as an older woman, I'm not a guy. I'm not, my vehicle one time, and I've sat at the border anywhere from an hour to 10 hours. And one time, it's a person drives me. I do not drive myself anymore. Somebody meets me at the airport, picks me up and drives me to the border. We sit there, we go through the whole thing, and then go over into Ukraine where I meet and make sure that the logistics, as you mentioned before, are all set up in place and that they're authentic and that they're true. because I'm not stupid and I'm not naive, and I know that like a drone that I spent $2,500 on could be worth $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to somebody else. And so I'm very, very conscientious about the flow of what's going and where it's going and the accountability to that.
Well, so much so that you've been recognized by the Ukrainian government with a Medal of Support. So you were on a Zoom call and all of a sudden you got surprised.
Yeah, it was supposed to just be a question and answer. I thought a fundraising type of thing, and they said, you know, you've been awarded this, I think there's 114 people in Ukraine, and now me and this other woman are the first two foreigners to ever be awarded something by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And I picked that up a week or so ago when I was there, and I gave them a flag of the United States. Great group up in Fredonia, the Women's League of Voters. I was going to a talk there, and I had this idea, I need to do something. I said, why don't we write all these names down on the flag so that it represents, they can see it's not just me. I'm the lucky one that gets to meet them and go there, but so I presented this flag with over 700 names and organizations on it, and they gave me the medal. It was really something.
I don't know if Ed, can you zero in on that? Got it. So that's uniquely given to Sally Naetzker Baer.
Surreal, right?
Yeah.
I Googled his name, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. I was like, is this like really a guy, or is this like somebody that just hangs? I mean, I had no idea. So I Googled him, and I was like, whoa, he like reports to Zelensky. So
I won't even attempt to pronounce his last name, but it's Valery, and he's the Ukrainian Commander of Armed Forces.
Yep.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. I was shocked.
And obviously greatly recognized. Now, tell me about cruising into, I can't use the term, that's if it's relaxed, but you are now traveling in Ukraine, and you kind of work your way through the western part of Ukraine, moving towards Kiev. You ever been to Kiev? Yeah.
So this one guy, we just, you know, again, it's just kind of circumstantially this whole thing's happening. And this one guy, Vitalik, he had picked me up. His English wasn't great. Like there's sometimes somebody will pick me up and we don't say a word to each other. I don't go to the bathroom, I don't eat, I don't do anything because there's no communicating going on because the language is so bad between the two of us. But Vitalik, he and his wife, Tanya, and I, during the trip in September, for some reason decided to go to Kiev and Irpin. I wanted to go to Irpin. That had really started this whole thing for me, and I wanted to go back and see this church and sort of see what the town had looked like. Subsequently, Bucha, which of course everybody knows about the atrocities, and there's another town nearby that physically had really taken a beating, and so we got into his van and off we went. And it was a beautiful, beautiful 3 or 4 days weather-wise, and we spent one day, well, we went to all these places, we took video, we were watching this kind of horror. Like, again, I'm from Asheville, right? So you put this like village of Asheville, and I'm in this war country looking at these buildings that have been shot to heck. And I'm thinking, do you know the song, How Did I Get Here?
Okay.
Huh?
Yeah.
You do. That's kind of goes through my head a lot. And we were in Kyiv, and I wanted to see the Maiden, which is where the war really started in 2014. It was their president at that time had promised that they would try to become closer to Europe. It was the day before he was supposed to sign, and he was in Putin's back pocket, and he said no, and the country imploded, basically. And there was a peaceful demonstration at the Maiden Square, which is this huge independent square. Long story short, we're standing there, just kind of soaking it in, and the shock and the horror of what we were going through for the last 8 months. And the speakers started blaring this song, and it was a song about Kyiv. It was in Ukrainian, but it was a song about Kyiv. And I just intuitively jumped up and started dancing with this 30-year-old man in the middle of the square. Nobody's around us. It's the capital city. There's nobody out. And he starts singing to me, so I realized that he has a voice. He's a professional dancer before the war, and he has this incredible voice. And it was the first time at that point in this journey that I think for both of us that we just felt kind of free and like a normal moment from this hell that was happening all around. And he, of course, experiences it way more than I do, but it was really a moment, like one I'll never forget. Yeah.
15 months into it, this war, what's the sense on the ground among the Ukrainian citizenry?
Yeah, this is painful for me. So I was just there like a week ago, and I'm on the western part of the country most of the time. So the real hell is over in the war zone on the east and down along the south. But it's impacting everybody. And it's wearing people down in the sense of mental health, really, and exhaustion, because a great majority of Ukrainians are like, just 24/7 trying to get money, trying to buy drones, trying to buy infrared sites, trying to buy vehicles. That's kind of the big thing now. We've gone from like the clothing through various phases. For a while it was tourniquets, really difficult to get in Europe, and now we're all kind of at this point in the journey, it's cars, it's drones, and it's infrared sites. And they're exhausted, and it was really, really, really painful to see just how bad it was taking a toll on people that I had seen since last May. A lot of these people in Lutsk, I have been, developing relationships with, and it's really taking a toll. It's really difficult. They're doing everything they can. If they're not being terrorized, they're doing everything they can.
How about you?
Yeah. Well, the toy store was in June of this last year, and the conversation was a toy store of my own, or I would go into therapy. So we chose the toy store, and it's worked because the toy store is fabulous. It's
Yep.
just so much fun.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. Oh, you've been there?
Oh, my kids go there all the time.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Especially my grandkids.
Yeah, no, it's just really, to have them come in, anybody come in and sort of experience their childhood, because we try to do that, and to remind them of their simpler times while creating these new memories. I mean, to me, it really is a therapeutic space. And so I would say, yeah, it's been, now I'm living more in reality. For a long time, it felt like I was living in a dream, because it was just so surreal. What was happening and what I was doing was so surreal. But now I kind of get it. It's coming together.
It's coming together. You're working with the folks. Are you still working with the folks down in Erie as far as Logistics Plus? Are you?
So that relationship, they did that big drop, and then I had secured close to $400,000 worth of medical aid, and they said that they would help me get 4 pallets of that to keep. So they did that as well, and then they actually supported me financially at one point to buy things. So it's been a $77,000 text my cousin made.
Yeah.
Just this intuitive, maybe something would happen, and it was $77,000.
Just as an aside, the owner of that Jim Berlin is
Yes.
from Jamestown. And he's the real deal, and is very conscientious and very philanthropic, and he's just,
Yeah.
that's the way he spins.
Yeah, we're hoping to meet him and to go out to eat with him and with Gretchen and whatnot. But honestly, probably the biggest challenge that I face at this point is just that I'm pretty much going 24/7, when I'm raising money and planning trips and purchasing things. So I'm trying to make a shift. It's literally brand new today and yesterday, to say that I would continue to raise money, because there's so many people that this is their only way of feeling like they can do something. And I appreciate that, and I know that I'm like their source or their trustworthy place to go. So I am working more on raising the money and then literally helping in that moment. So right now I helped buy a car today for a man from Lutsk that's on the front, and we'll continue to do that kind of thing. I have already raised enough to buy a drone. I need to purchase that kind of thing without flying back and forth.
We'll talk about, give me a pitch. Tell me what if I went on Facebook and saw the Baer Foundation, give me the correct name, but give me a pitch so that those who are watching this, not only tonight, but those who watch it on YouTube subsequently, with the advanced AC Nielsen ratings that we're gonna get, what would they do?
Well, I think, honestly, I have never had to pitch it. It's always been people's hearts are broken for what's going on there, and they want to do something, and some people don't feel comfortable giving to, like, the American Red Cross for whatever reason. It's a big organization, they don't like the huge overhead expenses, and so when they saw an individual woman doing this at my age, I think that they were like, okay, we see what's happening. She's taking this money, she's buying this stuff, I'm showing it on Facebook. My Facebook profile is not my own anymore, it's basically a public profile. I post these live videos so that people are following exactly what's happening every step of the way. And so and now politically things are getting different. There are some people that don't think that we should be involved with Ukraine at all, and I understand that. So I'm not here to convince somebody one way or the other. I'm just available as a source if it's something that somebody wants to feel like they're making a direct contact with Ukraine. I'm probably their person, because I don't think there's a lot of us around.
How do they get a hold of you?
So again, I'm on Facebook, Sally Naetzker Baer, and that Facebook
Baer,
yeah, is basically my primary way of communicating. For whatever reason, I was not a big Facebook user before. We have a website, bearessentials.org. I don't keep it up. I'm like, again, I'm not the technological wizard that, TikTokers or whatever. I don't know how to do that, but and then down at the store, and we have people literally come down to the store and hand us donations all the time.
And you are a 501c3?
Yeah.
So it's a tax deductible?
Yeah. And we always have a fundraiser on Facebook, so people can just click that and they get the paperwork directly if they want, or they can come to the store and then I give them a receipt.
You are not affiliated with any church, you're not part of a religious organization or any offshoot of that. How have the NGOs treated you? Just supportively, or they kind of say, what are you doing here?
Well, in Ukraine, the one group that I work with that's a nonprofit organization, they're primarily who I've worked with since May. That's who they work primarily for the Ukrainian government, the military, to get them the items that they need. And so I would say they've treated me really well. I mean, they clearly facilitated this acknowledgement from the Commander-in-Chief, Valerie. And then, honestly, I have no idea. Like, I've never even thought about that. I don't think there's anybody in the I speak pretty much on a weekly basis, and some of those are non-profits, I guess. So I really don't know the answer to that.
What's been the surprise?
One, that I'm still involved at the level that that happened at all is really, really, really shocking to me. It was kind of as if every moment of my life led up to that moment. And for full transparency, I didn't finish Peace Corps. And that was a huge disappointment for me. And there's some decent reasons why that didn't happen. I was in Lutsk at the time. Now that's where I ironically work out of mostly, is the same town. So that's really interesting. And it was a full circle moment, because I had carried that a little bit as a lost moment of not finishing. And it kind of propelled a lot of the international work that we did after that. And it just, in that moment, I knew that all things could be worked for good, because everything that I ever felt was a shortcoming of mine had turned into this incredibly powerful thing during this season of time. So if I die tomorrow, I'm going in peace, for sure.
Given your life arc, do you feel some sort of divine inspiration? Do you feel like there's a higher being that's sort of kind of giving you a sense of guidance here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I kind of ignored that for a lot of my life, and in 1998, that changed for me, and I really, I'm not a strong, it's a hard conversation, because in many ways, the church of today doesn't really reflect what we believe that Christ was about. He was a radical, accepting human while he was here. And it's just, so I did make that commitment to kind of follow that linear path. I'm really, really glad that I did. It changed the course of my life in so many ways. And yeah, it's definitely a driving factor behind what I do, is this sense of abandoning my own life, my own things, for the higher purpose of what's around us, not my own self. It's not about myself. It's the giving up of myself that has allowed me to live the life that I've lived in the last 20-something years.
This is remarkable. Are there other Sally Naetzker Bears out there?
Naetzker, the only Naetzkers are blood related, like closely blood related in the country, and that's it.
Yeah.
I know all of them pretty much.
So as far as just people.
Did you mean like symbolically or
Well, just,
metaphorically?
well,
Like,
you
do I
answered
know
that, you
other
answered
people?
one question, but let me ask the other question,
Yeah.
which is, people like you who are sort of individually taken up the task and raised, $600,000+ and taken on this initiative and finding ways where there was not found before. I mean, again, the war, though it's 15 months into it, you had to start out of whole cloth to figure out how you would do it, where to get the product, what products to get, and then actually, for at least 6-year times, you've been in Ukraine, so you've been on the dusty trail, and do you see anybody else that's actually had that initiative?
No, but it's mostly because I just keep my head down and do what I'm supposed to do. There's probably other people, but I just keep my head down and do what I'm supposed to do. And that's just to keep basically providing a space for people to feel like they can make a difference in this situation. And I am shocked. This isn't me, really. It's a much bigger thing. I just happen to be kind of the face and the person that sees the coordination of it all, and the organization of it all. But it's really remarkable. I say that not about me. I say that about the people that have created this environment. I threatened to stop a couple days ago. It was the first time I had done that. And then I kind of said, wait a minute, I could keep doing it if I just raise the money and do it this way, whatever. So I got on Facebook and I was kind of like, okay, we're going to keep going and this is what it's going to look like. And I threw up a fundraiser and, $300 or $400 later in a couple hours, it's them doing it. It's the hope that they feel that they're making a difference, and it keeps me doing it. I said yes in the beginning, and it was a big one, I'll give you that, but it was the hundreds of yeses after that have kept this thing going. And I'm just going for the ride and saying, I got you, I'll do what I can, and keep it going, so.
And it sounds like it's just kind of been a continuous ride, but at some point, have you kind of dipped and hit a brick wall?
Never.
Yeah.
Not once. The doors flew open from the beginning. And I used to say it to Tom. I would say it almost on a daily basis, like, is this a dream? Like, it literally felt that way. The doors flew open from the beginning, and they still do to this day. Because even me, wanting to quit, Vitalik is the one who wrote to me. And actually, he didn't write to me. He posted a fundraiser. They were buying a car for this guy from Lutsk. And I said, who's doing it? Do you know who it is? Making sure that it was a clean. And he's like, yes, it's a friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. So I sent him, I said, I'll PayPal you that, because PayPal's not a great way to move money. There's no paper trail in the sense that like you're not giving it to a logistics. But because I know this guy and I've spent hours upon hours upon hours with him in Ukraine, I'm like, no, okay. And then the guy who was actually getting this car, friended me on Instagram and thanked me personally. And it was like, you want to fall over. This is a guy standing out on the front lines of Bakhmut, and he's texting me, to thank me for, this effort to help get him, I can't, I just can't, the emotions are too much. It's just too much, right? That's just too much. He's a real live father guy standing there on his phone, texting me in Lakewood, New York. No. He's not defending just Ukrainian freedom, he's defending world freedom, That's humbling stuff.
Well, this is humbling to listen to you.
I don't hear it, but thank you. Yeah.
Really, it's remarkable. So you came down here today more or less of your own free will.
Here?
Yeah.
Yes, and I didn't think it was going to be visual. So this is a Ukrainian sweater. I just bought it.
When you just came back, you were sort
so
of
I'm supposed
just
to look rough.
driving in,
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
So I appreciate that. So what's the question you expected that we haven't really touched yet?
No, I love that you tied this back to my dad. Thank you. It's a really emotional moment for me. I will share it with my mom. My mom's enormously proud. I think my dad would be. I think he'd be more proud of me coming here in some ways, maybe of the whole story. But when I was coming here, I thought, this is a full circle moment. He would be proud, So thank you for that. And I really don't have time to think. So I actually said it to Tom on the way over here. I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, maybe they could have sent you questions. I was like, I didn't even have time to think about it. So I said, no, I'd just come in and do what you got to do. So I appreciate it.
You would not have gotten any questions from me.
Yeah,
So I'm
okay,
glad you didn't
good.
ask.
See, we're as prepared as, we both do the
Yeah,
same.
and as you were walking in, just for the record, your relative, Wilson with two L's, may have had something to do with this. What do you think?
Well, especially after watching that, right? Because I think there's a picture of my grandfather with Jackson in that one picture. Where did you get that picture from?
I think I just got them offline. So, I think we may have gotten from your dad, or at least copies of the letters that Jackson had sent to your grandfather.
Okay.
So
it would have been great. My dad's grandfather's a
Grandfather, yes,
great-grandfather,
great-grandfather,
right?
yes.
Because in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were wood people out of Dunkirk, and and plus I could just feel it. My uncle is Julian Naetzker, and he is an architect that did many buildings in this area. And then the plywood has been long part of our family history. So our house actually was built in 1940, and one room is completely from Eastern Plywood. You can see it, or from the plywood company.
Yeah.
So there's a really good chance. My mother had mentioned it today. And she said, but don't say anything, because I don't know for sure, because she's 89. But I wouldn't be surprised, because they were good friends.
Yeah.
Jackson and my great-great, I don't know how many greats.
So we'll get our people on it. Kristen McMahon
do.
has made copious notes about this.
Yeah,
so.
let me know.
Yeah.
I think that's fabulous.
Two L's, Wilson, two L's.
Yeah, that's what makes it easy, because it's weird, the 2L thing.
What, just on a total unrelated, but Brian Wilson, not the Beach Boys, but Brian was the activist with two L's in this area. Does that mean okay?
No.
We digress.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's all right.
6 months from now, what do you think you'll be?
No, my husband's back there going, please don't answer, please don't answer. I have no idea. My hope is that in the spring, and it's coming, that Ukraine has enough behind them to kind of put an end to this madness. It's really, really disturbing. you know, how many, and it's Russians too, like when the tourniquets, I don't do it just for Ukraine, like anybody gets to use those tourniquets and save a life. But I don't even know, 6 months would be like August or September in my toy store, getting ready for Christmas.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. And then maybe on the side, buying a tourniquet or a drone or some sort of military thing, but yeah.
Well, your life cycle generally, but certainly since February and March of 2022 has been nothing short of extraordinary, of a personal plus family-supported mission, which is, I'm so thrilled you shared this with us, and we'll, of course, share it on our own YouTube site, and I can't thank you enough for coming in.
Well, thank you. It's really been an honor to be here, and it's been, just thank you.
Sally Naetzker Baer, thank you. That was great.